Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy. I welcome you to my session on literary criticism and theory. Today we will discuss the various aspects involved in new historicism. Before proceeding further, let me clarify that this is a specialized session specifically designed for the MEG learners. Hence, all the aspects discussed here will be solely limited to or based on the prescribed syllabus and study material of MEG. In our previous session, we discussed the beginnings of cultural studies. So this is a continuation of that lecture. Here we will give specific focus to new historicism. Section 5.3 of your IGNOU official study material. So as I already told you, it is a critical approach. It developed in 1980s through the writings of Stephen Greenblatt. What does new historicism characterize? It refers to a parallel reading of the text with its socio-cultural and historical conditions, and this forms the core text, and hence we can say that it is opposite to new critics and their characteristic. That is, the new critics follow text as if an autotelic entity, that is, they won't look into the background of the text, but new historicism does. So that is the basic difference between new historicism and new criticism. You are always free to add your own reading if relevant into your answers. If you write this point, this would be of great relevance. Okay. Now your text mentions that the newness of new historicism is posited against the backdrop of historicist works like Tilliard's book, The Elizabethan World Picture. I'll explain that. Before that, do you have an idea who this E.M.W. Tilliard is? He was an English classical and literary scholar. So this particular book was written in 1943. So according to the new historicist reading, these historicists go beyond what Tilliard viewed in this book, and they say that there is no fixed history which can be treated as the background against which literature can be foregrounded. According to the new historicist reading, there is no fixed history which can be treated as the background against which literature can be read or foregrounded. So to new historicists, historical periods are not unified entities. So the question of there having been a single Elizabethan worldview does not arise. That is what has been discussed there. Now we will discuss further aspects. That is, there is this historicity of texts mentioned in this aspect. That is, new historicism, as Louis Montrose suggests, deals with the textuality of history and the historicity of texts. So what do you mean by these two phrases? Textuality of history. This refers to the idea that history is constructed and fictionalized, and that historicity of text refers to the inevitable embedment within the socio-political conditions of its production and interpretation. You don't have to study all these things. I was just adding some extra information. You just have to remember what is mentioned in your study material. That is, new historicists try to intervene in the canonical literary text, hence detaching it from the weight of literary scholarship, and they try to see it in a new light. That is what is relevant here. So the concern is on the historicity of texts and also with the textual nature of history itself. That is what I told you, historicity of texts and textuality of history. If you want to remember, you can note down that this has been put down by Louis Montrose. We will look into him later when he is mentioned in your study material. Okay? Yes. Now let's focus our attention towards Stephen Greenblatt. I have been repeating this name many times. So who was Stephen Greenblatt? We will see. He is an American Shakespearean, literary historian and author. What do you mean by American Shakespearean? Because he is an American author who works on Shakespearean interpretations. Alright, so he served as a professor at Harvard University since 2000, and as you all know, he was one of the founding fathers of New Historicism. Now, you need to by heart one work of Stephen Greenblatt, which is that work, Renaissance Self-Fashioning. It has a subtitle, From Moore to Shakespeare. So the full title is Renaissance Self-Fashioning from Moore to Shakespeare, published in the year 1980. So why is this particular book so important? In this book, the author, who's the author? Greenblatt. When you write, take care of the spelling. Greenblatt. He analyzes the ways in which writers fashion their self-identities through a network of social, psychological, political and intellectual discourses. So in this book, Renaissance Self-Fashioning, Greenblatt analyzed how writers fashioned their self-identities. So writers such as Thomas More, William Tyndale, Thomas Wyatt, Edmund Spenser and Christopher Marlowe are mentioned. So who were these people? I'm not sure whether you are aware of More. Who's More? Have you heard of Thomas More? Do you know any renowned work by Thomas More? Have you heard of, yes, you, wonderful, Dhanasri. Oh, it's Dhanyasri. I always make mistake with your name. Please do pardon me. Yes, Utopia. Yes, that is wonderful. This is a book written by, or rather we'll say this is a very important work, very renowned work written by Thomas More. He was a British author and Renaissance humanist. William Tyndale. Who was William Tyndale? Have you heard this name before? He has translated something. Do you know what it is? He was an English linguist. His translation of Bible, wonderful, yes, is much renowned. That is what he is famous for. So the next person is Thomas Wyatt. He is also very popular. Don't tell me that you don't know him, because I remember teaching him when I taught you MEG 1 British poetry. I told you he introduced certain, but one particular type of sonnet has been introduced by Wood. Do you know which sonnet? Sonnets are of three types: Shakespearean, Petrarchan and Italian. So Thomas Wood must have introduced the Italian sonnet. And also one more aspect. What is that? Terza rima. Do you remember what a terza rima is? Terza rima was also introduced by Thomas Wood. Now comes a well-renowned name, Edmund Spenser. I'm very sure that you are aware of Spenser. He was an English poet. Did you know that he was known as the poet's poet? He was known as the poet's poets. It was basically because many poets learned versification from Spenser. Yes, I saw that answer from Adira, Prothalamion. There was this companion poem of Prothalamion. Do you remember the name? Prothalamion and Epithalamion. Good. So these were seminal works by Edmund Spenser. But there was this magnum opus, this epic poem written by Spenser. Do you know the name? An epic poem by Edmund Spenser. In many parts, it has this word queen in the title. Yes, good. Fairy Queen. So, Fairy Queen, just a revision, maybe a brush up of what you've already learned. Now comes Marlowe. I'm very sure that you know the father of English tragedy. Who is renowned as the father of English tragedy? So obviously it would be Christopher Marlowe. If you didn't know, you can jot this down somewhere. if interested, no compulsion. So he was an English playwright, poet, and translator during the Elizabethan era. Yes. Yeah. So I suppose you are relaxed. Now we'll move back into Greenblatt. So he looks at Thomas More. He takes up Thomas More's identity, his representation and constructions of himself. There was a reason for doing this. Before that, it is this More that is mentioned in the subtitle of Renaissance self-fashioning, from More to Shakespeare. From that era to Shakespearean era, those writers were considered. So, why did he take up More's identity? It was because More needed to be a political mover in the court and a family man at home. He had to do dual roles. There, in the court, an official role, and in the family, he had to be the breadwinner. Alright, so he was under a compulsion to embody the repressive powers of the state in public. At the same time, he became the utopian father and husband in private life. I repeat that, he had to embody the repressive powers of the state in public life, whereas when he comes home, he became the utopian father and husband in his private life. So to achieve this, he needed to fashion himself into a different beings, the duality he had to fashion himself into. So that is explained in this particular work. Read about this. This would be important for your TEE. So regarding Shakespearean plays, what does Greenblatt opine? So according to Greenblatt, he sees Shakespearean plays as being centrally and repeatedly concerned with the production and containment of subversion and disorder. So in his essay, Invisible Bullets, Renaissance Authority and Subversion, he offers the thesis that subversiveness is necessary for power to become visible and fearsome. That is an important point. If you could remember, it would be great. So, when we discuss Greenblatt and New Historicism, and especially the Shakespearean reading, we need to mention two more important critics. They are Jonathan Goldberg and Louis Monroe. So about Louis Monroe, I have already told you regarding the textuality of history and historicity of texts. When we discuss those aspects, I mentioned this name. So who is he? He is an American literary theorist and scholar. Interestingly, he retired from academia in the year 2010 to pursue a career in photography. So right now, of late he has been into photography rather than academia. The other person, Jonathan Goldberg, he was an American literary theorist and professor at Johns Hopkins University. I'm not very sure whether you know, he just recently passed away. If I remember it right, he passed away in the month of December 2022 at the age of 79. Yes. So Jonathan Goldberg's reading of Measure for Measure and Louis Monroe's reading of A Midsummer Night's Dream gave us a good idea of how new historicists generally read Shakespeare. Now let me ask you, are you familiar with these two works, Measure for Measure and A Midsummer Night's Dream? Do you know who wrote these works? Yeah, have you studied these in detail? No, right? You just know the names, I believe. So, Measure for Measure is believed to have been written in 1603 or 1604. Anyway, it was first performed in the year 1604 and it was first published in the first folio of 1623. This one is among the most passionately discussed plays of Shakespeare. In this play, the Duke temporarily removes himself from governing his city and he deputes a member of his administration to enforce the laws more rigorously. So regarding that, Goldberg discusses measure for measure in his 1983 book James I and the Politics of Literature. His argument is that the dominant trap in measure for measure is the unfolding of government, the revelation of politicization that links public and private spheres. You wouldn't understand this unless you read the play. So if you have time, you may at least have a look and do the summary of the play so that you'll get better clarity regarding measure for measure and Goldberg's view of measure for measure. Literature and power in Goldberg's view are rooted in language, and his overall concern is the issue of representation as the common ground of literature and politics. So that is regarding that. And regarding Louis Monroe, his essay is titled Shaping Fantasies. So it is in this essay that he mentions the construction of a powerful mythical identity for Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I, through narratives and dramas which played out the shaping fantasies of Elizabethan culture. So for that matter, he takes up Queen's projection of herself as a mother of the nation, and that needed to be seen along with her projection as a virgin who was openly flirtatious and provocative. So the projection as a mother and as a virgin. Monroe notes that Elizabeth was placed as a woman at the head of a strong patriarchal society, and her power involved a series of contractions and complications. So what Monroe observed here is that Queen Elizabeth was placed as a woman with power at the head of a patriarchal society, and her power involved a series of complications and contractions. So this issue of power remains central to New Historicism. Whenever we discuss that, this power also comes in. So literary texts for these New Historicist critics have specific functions within the network of power relations in society. That is something to remember. These texts have importance or functions within a network of power relations in society. Now if you look into your study material towards the end of section 5.3, you could see 5 points which are basic assumptions put forth by H. Aram Versier in the introduction of his 1989 work titled The New Historicism. So the common ground made New Historicists identifiable loosely as a group, and those assumptions are 5 in number as mentioned in your textbook. I'll quickly read through that because of our time constraints. Every expressive act is embedded in a network of material practices. Every act of unmasking, critique and opposition uses the tools it condemns and risks falling prey to the practice it exposes. Literary and non-literary texts circulate inseparably. No discourse, imaginative or archival, gives access to changing truths nor express inalterable human nature. Critical method and language educate to describe culture under capitalism, participate in the economy they describe. So in short, we can say that New Historicism presents a decentered history of cultural diversity. Make sure that you remember the basic tenets of New Historicism. A broad New Historicist orientation helps in understanding the degree to which literature participates in forming the dominant ideological assumptions of a particular time. So the main trouble has been that the text could be subjected to more superficial and generalized reading as a result of an interest in the function rather than the interpretability of text. So this is considered as a disadvantage of New Historicism. To sum up, we can say that I focused on the word-by-word descriptions in the textbook. Remember, Renaissance self-fashioning was a core text, a similar text, and from Moore to Shakespeare has analyzed how these writers have fashioned their self-identity. Then Greenblatt sees Shakespeare's play as being repeated, centrally concerned with the production and containment of subversion. Remember that we also studied 2 notable critics, Jonathan Goldberg and Louis Monroe, and concluded with a quick mention of the 5 assumptions put forth by Aramis in his book The New Historicism. So with that, we come to the end of this particular session on the beginnings of cultural studies and new historicism. We have discussed the other literary theories of block A titled the contemporary literary theories. These are very important for your TE. Make sure that you focus your attention towards them. So that's for this session. We'll end the session now. Thank you so much.